Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Am's Untitled Podcast. I'm Am. Hi, if you've just stumbled across my podcast, it's very nice to meet you. I recently started a podcast because I feel like I say this every single time. I enjoy rambling. It's one of my favorite things to do. And especially when it comes to things that I love, I enjoy rambling. So I decided that I was going to start a podcast to sort of talk about those things and find people like me who like to listen to somebody ramble about their favorite things. So, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Titan's Curse, which is the third book in the Percy Jackson book series. Just before I get started, I do want to apologize if I sound a little bit bunged up, a little bit sniffly. I'm not feeling the best, but I didn't want to wait because I could feel worse in a few days, and because I'm in the rhythm of doing these, so I have like a pattern. So Tuesdays I record both episodes and then it goes up either Wednesday or Thursday. So I've got myself into a routine and I don't really want to stray from that. So even though I'm not feeling the best at the minute, I still feel like I should do this because I don't want to miss out, and I really do enjoy doing these, and sometimes it's just the perfect serotonin boost that I need. I'm also in my last week of uni, so it's final submission week. So I did think that, oh, I would wait until I submitted my last assignment before I sat down and did this. But because I don't feel the best, I'm just thinking that I'm gonna wait till the afternoon and then sit and do it properly when my brain's a little bit more functional, you could say. But yeah, like I said, this podcast is so fun for me. I really enjoy doing this. So it might just be what I need to pull myself out of feeling a bit ill because I don't really like to stop when I'm poorly. I like to, unless I'm really bad and I can't get out the bed, I do genuinely try to carry on. I'll go, if I had uni today, I would have gone in just even though I don't feel the best. Like yesterday, I was awful, but I still went in because I was like, oh, it's gonna be like my last chance to see everybody before October and New Year starts. So yeah, and I also know that second year is going to be a bit more stressful, but I'm so happy I now have 5 months gap. So I'm thinking of getting a job. I have been looking. It's not easy, especially the geographical location that I'm in. It makes it very difficult for me. And because I don't drive, I'm still learning to drive. It kind of makes a bit of an issue as well. But yeah, and I'm also planning on going on holiday this year. Um, I'm gonna go on one family holiday, and then me and my cousin sister are gonna go for a girls' holiday. But I'll let you guys know about that. So maybe one of these podcasts might get recorded in a foreign country, so you're just gonna have to stay with me for that. But I will let you guys know on Instagram where I am, what I'm up to, that sort of thing. And don't panic if you don't see an episode up. It might have been that I've just ran out of time to upload it in the time that I did, so don't worry. And if you ever are wondering where I am, feel free to DM me on Instagram and be like, "Where are you?" I'll happily answer. It just takes me a couple of days. I do check the account though very often because I've got my own private account and I've got my podcast account. So yeah. Anyway, let's get on with it. I've already nattered away for 3.5 minutes about everything that's got to do with what I'm talking about in this episode. So let's go for it. So, Titan's Curse. So this is part one. So I'm going to do the first. How many chapters? 10, I think. Yeah, first 10 chapters because it's a 20 chapter book again. Um, and the first chapter is called My Rescue Operation Goes Very Wrong. So the chapter opens in the winter. So it's Percy, Annabeth, and Thalia on a drive from New York to Bar Harbor, and Sally Jackson has taken them there. And she kind of talks about how much she likes Annabeth, which is good. We want the mom to approve of the relationship, and Sally really likes Annabeth, so it's nice that she and her have that dynamic, make it easier for Percy in the future. There's nothing worse than your mom hating your future spouse, believe me. And then Percy asks Thalia about her mother, and they basically come to this gymnasium to find Grover. And the reason why Grover's there is because they've seen two new half-blood kids that they need to bring to camp, basically. And Thalia sort of manipulates the mist so that they can sneak in. And, she says, has Chiron not taught you that? So a lot of this book is more of the competitive nature of Thalia and Percy's relationship. They have there's one moment where it's exactly like how Annabeth said, in the previous book, she doesn't know whether they'd be best friends or if they'd want to kill each other. And I think they bring that dynamic really well. There's times where they're just friends, and there's time where they just want to kill each other, and it's really funny. Like the whole book, the dynamic is just one of the best arcs of the book, I think. And I think they have a really good like rivalry going on, which I think is great. And I also think that they compete for Annabeth's attention as well, which I think is really funny. And then Grover tells them that he's found two half-blood kids, so a boy and a girl, called Nico and Bianca. Remember, those names are very important in this book. Um, and then this teacher called Dr. Thorne. So basically, it's a military school, essentially. And they find out that he's actually a monster. And Thalia tells them like they have to make it look natural, like they're supposed to be there. So she tells them like, "Oh, go mingle, go dance," because there's currently a dance going on in the scene. And and Percy's like, "Oh, well, who should I ask to dance?" Oh my God, this guy is so oblivious. It's unbelievable. And Annabeth's like, "You asked me, so you mean brain?" Like, "Hello, I'm stood right in front of you." And he's like, "Oh yeah." So funny. Like, I book, like in particular, Percy is just a slight spoiler for what's gonna happen later on. Percy is just in the most pissy mood throughout the book because of Annabeth, but I'll come back to that later on. And Annabeth tells Percy that she can't move to San Francisco. So basically, her dad has got a job in San Francisco, but the issue is that that place is not safe for half-bloods, and you'll see why later on. I think it comes up more in the second part of the book, but I'll talk about that when I get there. And Percy, as he's chasing after Dr. Thorne, he finds Nico and Bianca, and then he gets ambushed basically by Dr. Thorne, and that's where the chapter sort of comes to an end. So chapter 2 is the vice principal gets a missile launcher. Oh God, you know what, Rick with these titles he kills me every single time. Every title is so interesting. So peace. Jesus Christ. Right, let's carry on. Percy, Bianca, and Nico are taken somewhere by Dr. Thorne, basically. They're taken to the edge of a cliff or something. And, Dr. Thorne tells them that they're wanted by the general. Remember the general, he's also very important later on in the story. And, they tell him that there is a great stirring of monsters underway, which that quote is directly from the book. Remember that quote? Again, another there's lots of hints dropped at the beginning of the Titan's Curse that kind of set the tone as slightly darker than the first two books, but I'll come back to that later. And Percy tells them like, let's just jump into the ocean. And Bianca's very hesitant. Remember, she's just a kid. Like for her, this is like three people that have just randomly chopped up and be like, "We're here to save you," which is I would be a little bit hesitant towards that as well. So I can't necessarily blame her in this book for feeling like that. And then eventually Annabeth comes and saves them. Thalia tries to kill Dr. Thorne, but she is unsuccessful. And then the hunters, who are, I think, are they children? Well, they're not exactly children of Artemis because Artemis is a maiden, but they're sort of like they work for her basically, and she treats them like her children. And the hunters come and they attack Dr. Thorne, and Zoe Nightshade is introduced. She's one of the hunters. She's the lead hunter. Remember her? She's also very important. The thing is, I can't talk about it yet because it doesn't make sense. Like plot wise, like the audience doesn't know the importance of these characters just yet. So I'll come back to those. And then Dr. Thorne transforms into a manticore, and he grabs Annabeth and runs off with her. And then Artemis appears and she introduces herself as the goddess of the hunt, and that's where the chapter ends. So by Dr. Thorne running off with Annabeth, that is like the biggest thing because obviously Annabeth for the last two books has been very much present in Percy's life. Like she's his companion, she's his best friend, like they're there for each other. This is the first time. And to be honest, in this book, there isn't much of Percy and Annabeth. Like they're apart from each other for most of the book, which is why Percy's in the most pissy mood you can possibly imagine because Annabeth isn't with him. Yeah, so that chapter is like almost like the first turning point in the story. Like it's setting like the stepping stones. It's building the foundation of what this book is and what the next two books are going to be, which I think is very clever. Rick is very good at creating moments Like now, as I'm reading this back, I've read the book. It's been a week since I read the book. Like I said, I've had been drowning in uni assignments that have been due, so like I haven't had a chance to sit down and read Battle of the Labyrinth yet. I will get there, I promise, in time for next week's episode. This time next week, I would have finished it. That is my aim. Yeah. So Annabeth is just gone basically, and nobody knows where she is, and it's a really big moment, I think, for Percy. Like she's no longer there to help him. So chapter three is Bianca D'Angelo makes a choice. So, Grover obviously has a huge crush on Artemis and the Hunters because obviously like it's associated with nature, that sort of thing. He's funny throughout the book, like it's just something you've got to read to understand why he loves them so much. And then, Bianca, she's very much like Percy in the sense that she doesn't believe in the gods, like what they're telling them about their dad being an Olympian. Like she doesn't believe it. She's like, "What?" And then you've got Nico. As you can see, like there's such a change in the siblings because Nico thinks that it's really cool and like he's obviously believing all this and he's been brought into this amazing world. Like he's so full of wonder. And Bianca reminds me a lot of Percy in the first book because Percy was very repellent to accepting to accepting that the Olympians and the gods actually exist. So yeah, she reminded me of Percy in that way, which made me laugh a little bit. And Artemis tells all of them that Annabeth is vanished, like that she can't see her, she doesn't know where she is, basically. And Artemis tells Bianca that I want to talk to you about something. It's just yeah, very important. Again, that conversation is very important. Although because the books are written from Percy's perspective, you don't actually get to hear firsthand what happened in that conversation. But just remember that moment. And then Grover and Nico leave because obviously Artemis wants to talk to Bianca alone. So she tells Grover to sort of distract Nico. And they play Myth Magic, which is the game with like the mythical creatures and stuff, which is pretty cool. Again, that's also a very important detail to remember later on. And Thalia's pissed off. Obviously, she's just got Annabeth back after all these years of being a tree, and now she's disappeared. And she blames Percy for the reason why Annabeth was taken. And it, it- I kind of understand where she's coming from, but I also disagree with her. Like what happened with Dr. Thorne wasn't necessarily Percy's fault. Like yes, he ran off and he broke and he deviated from the plan, but he did manage to save Bianca and Nico. It's just unfortunate that Annabeth was taken away from him because of that. But then that's like with every action that anybody takes, like there's always a consequence for every action that you take. So I don't think that it's necessarily fair to blame one specific person from it. But again, I think that's just anger masking her hurt of losing her best friend, I think, more than anything. And Zoe calls Percy to speak with Artemis. She says, Lady Artemis wants to speak to you. And Artemis says that, oh, there's this monster that's coming to bring down Olympus, so I'm gonna go and find that monster and try and defeat it, basically. And Artemis tells Percy to take the hunters back to Camp Half-Blood, just for their own protection and their own safety, which they're all completely against. They want to go with their Lady Artemis, but she says no. And they find out that Artemis has offered Bianca an opportunity to join the hunt, even though she's young. And Bianca has wholeheartedly accepted doing this. And Artemis tells Percy that it's time for them to meet her. Is he brother Apollo, or is he just a brother? I'm not sure. This whole like Greek mythology family confuses me. I think they're brother and sister. I'm not sure if they're twins, but I'm pretty sure that they're brother and sister. So yeah, I think the biggest reveal in this chapter is obviously Bianca deciding to join the hunt, which for a kid must have been a big decision, but she sort of doesn't hesitate, which I like. She's got that feisty energy. I like that. I really appreciate that. Sorry about that pause. I had to blow my nose and I didn't want that on the podcast recording. Anyway, so chapter four is Thalia torches New England, which I think these chapter titles, I swear, they get better and better with every book, I must say. So the chapter sort of opens up with Grover swooning over Artemis, and Thalia is sort of pissed off at Zoe Nightshade, and the reason why she's pissed off with her doesn't get revealed till later in the book, but they don't like each other very much, I think. And Apollo enters, and Thalia something along the lines of, "Oh, he's really hot." And I don't know if it's Percy or Grover that said it, but he was like, "Well, yeah, he's." the god of the sun, so of course it's gonna be hot. And she's like, no, I didn't mean it like that. It's so funny. Do you know what? These little moments, like of like pure comedy gold, are what I love about reading. It's because there's some really good like little jokes in that. And I remember I was sat in the car reading this and taking notes for this, and I burst out laughing. And my mom was like, "What's so funny?" I'm just like, "Never mind, doesn't matter." And Artemis tells Apollo to help escort the huntresses to camp, and he's got a special chariot. So, yeah, that's how he's going to take them to camp, essentially. Oh no, actually, that's not this scene. That's the other scene. We'll come back to that. So Apollo takes them into his special car. I think it's a limo, from what I can remember, although I can't remember. Again, my brain is a little bit cloudy because I'm not well, so like you're just gonna have to bear with me a second. I've got like the worst headache you can possibly imagine. I've tried paracetamol, it's not working. Can't take ibuprofen, so because it sets off my IBS, so I have to just kind of carry on. And Artemis tells Zoe that she's the one that's in charge. Yeah, Zoe is very loyal to Artemis, and you'll see why later on. I keep saying later on, and I feel bad because I know these details, but I can't say it yet because it's just unfair for me to say it right now. And Apollo sort of forces Thalia to drive. He's like, "Oh, you're old enough to drive, like you can drive." And she's a bit like, "No, I don't know." But to be honest, she doesn't really know her age at this point because obviously she's been a tree for so long. Like, do you count the years that she was a tree? I don't really know. And you can start to see Percy's jealousy towards Thalia. Like, why is everybody like so, what's the word? Like infatuated with her. Like he doesn't see like the big hoo-ha behind her. And I guess it's just like like I said, it's the rivalry jealousy in it. There's always one of them that's trying to be better than the other, I guess. And eventually they get to Camp Half-Blood, with lots of trials and tribulations due to Thalia's awful driving, essentially. So, chapter 5 is I place an underwater phone call. So, the chapter opens at Camp Half Blood. And what I love about this book in particular is it's set in the winter. And I've always wondered what Camp Half Blood would look like in the winter. I bet it'd just be like covered in snow and oh, it'd be beautiful. Yeah. Anyway, and that's why I like it. Like, this is the only book that's set in the winter, which makes me kind of sad because I just, to be honest, now that we've got the TV show, like, if they go on to do Titan's Curse, Battle of the Labyrinth, The Last Olympian, which I hope that they do, I can't wait to see, like, what Cap Harpland would look like in the winter. I think it would be so beautiful. And Zoe tells the hunters to go to cabin 8, and Grover offers to help them. He's such a little simp, is the only word that I can think of right now. It's quite funny, actually. It is entertaining, I'm not gonna lie. And then Apollo tells Percy to watch out for any prophecies. Now, again, that's also like planting the seed and watering it later on, sort of thing. So, again, it's another thing that I can't talk about because I'm pretty sure it doesn't happen in the first half of the book. We'll see. And then Chiron, asks Percy, "Where's Annabeth?" And he's obviously Percy tells him that she's disappeared, and he wants to send out a search party for her, basically. And then Mr. D, as we know, he's not interested in helping any of the students, and he's just like, "Yeah, whatever, she's gone. Like, there's nothing I can do about it." And Percy gets this is where Percy, I think, starts getting pissed off because it's like, why isn't he doing anything? Like, Annabeth has been at camp longer than anybody else. Like, she's the head counselor of the Athena cabin. She's one of the most important, arguably one of the most important campers in all of Camp Half-Blood. Like, why is nobody willing to help, essentially? And Nico discovers that Chiron is it's so funny because like Nico is just basically a more excited version of Percy when he came to Camp Half-Blood. And I think that comparison was really important because Rick wanted to create Percy and Nico, but to make them sort of polar opposites but have lots of things in common as well. And I'll talk more about that in part 2 because there's a big important thing that happens that brings out that dynamic a bit more, but I'll talk more about that later. And Chiron tells Percy, like, as a distraction, like, let's play capture the flag, just get everybody's minds off everything, that sort of thing. And Percy actually goes and apologizes to Thalia, like, "I'm sorry about everything that's happened so far." And they do have a good dynamic. They do have moments where they like you can see the friendship, but they definitely play at the rivalry thing a lot more, which I agree with. And it Percy has kept Annabeth's Yankees cap inside his cabin. He keeps looking at it, and it's just I can't imagine how difficult it must be for him because Annabeth is like was the only person in his life I felt like the only girl that he's ever met that's never picked on him, basically. Well, she does pick on him, but in a loving way, not in like a bullying sort of way. And I think he feels that sense of loss, like without her, like he feels like he's got nobody to air his concerns out to. Like obviously Grover is there, but he's currently quite distracted. So I think Percy feels kind of alone, which I think is really sad actually. Like when I was reading the book, like I was feeling like choked up at times. It's like this poor kid, like the only person who's been able to guide him through this crazy world and hold his hand and take him through is Annabeth. And now that she's not there, it's like he's kind of lost his purpose in a sense. And then he decides that he wants to IRS message Tyson. And he finds out that Poseidon is actually going to war. So there's a war happening under the sea. So Poseidon's actually really busy with that. And Tyson has been like preparing what do you call it, like the weapons and stuff for battle, you could say. So this next scene is significantly important because Percy falls asleep and he dreams about Annabeth and he sees Luke as well, which is already like he's missing her enough as it is, and like the fact that you just stuck Luke in that Rick is cruel. So it's like he really, really puts characters through the ringer, and he sees Luke in trouble, and Luke is calling out to Annabeth for help, and Percy's like screaming at her, like, don't help him, like he betrayed you. He hates Luke. Like he honestly hates Luke so much. And I think a lot of it is of course like Luke betrayed them. He was the lightning thief, he framed Percy. But I don't think that's the only reason why he hates him. I think it's because he likes Annabeth and he knows that Annabeth has a crush on Luke and he's just worried that her feelings are gonna get in the way and it's going to like it causes a lot of problems for them. Like, let's just put it like that. Like, even in like the next book, like Battle of the Labyrinth, Last Olympian, a lot of the fights that Percy and Annabeth have are over Luke. And I think for him, like, it's a really hard pill to swallow. Which, yeah, he's a very jealous guy when it comes to Annabeth. I love that. I think it's so funny. And Annabeth helps Luke, and he gives her like this crushing weight that she has to hold, and instead of like taking the load together, he leaves her and he says, oh, I'll be back later or something. And Percy wakes up and that's how the chapter ends. So he from this point he knows that Annabeth is in trouble and he knows that the reason why she's in trouble is because of Luke, which I think kind of if he wasn't pissed off before, like he's definitely gonna be in a pissy mood now, basically. Yeah, I think that chapter is probably one of my favorites from the beginning of Titan's Curse because it kind of sets the tone for the Luke, Annabeth, and Percy relationship for the rest of the books, essentially. So, chapter 6 is an old dead friend comes to visit. So, the chapter opens up and it's Percy talking to Grover about this dream that he's had. And he finds out that Grover tells him that Zoe has been having similar dreams as well about people being in trouble, essentially. And it's because Artemis has been kidnapped. As she was going to look for this monster, she's been kidnapped by somebody. And then Percy finds out that Annabeth was actually thinking about there was a phase in her life when she was thinking about joining the Hunters, which to Percy is a big shock. It's like, why would she do that? Why would she choose to leave camp? And again, that's not revealed till the second half of the book. And let's just say Percy doesn't take that news very well. Like he's like, oh, like it's almost like for him it's like mini betrayal. Like why would she want to join the hunt like when she could stay at Camp Half-Blood and be free, essentially. And then Percy wants to go and consult the Oracle about what to do next, essentially. And once he goes up to the Oracle, he asks the question, but the Oracle doesn't respond. And he sees Aphrodite's scarf, which was something that him and Annabeth found. I think it was in Sea of Monsters. Yeah, and it's basically a love magic scarf, and Annabeth takes it off him like, no, you don't need any love magic today, basically. And he leaves the attic and he joins Capture the Flag, and Nico's playing for the first time as well. And it's so funny because Percy and Thalia are arguing about how to defeat everybody and capture the flag. Because obviously, normally Annabeth is the leader, but of course, she's not there anymore. So it's up to Percy and Thalia basically to lead the cabins. And again, it's playing up at this whole rivalry. Like they've had this moment where Percy's apologizing to Thalia, and now they're back at each other's throats again, which is really funny. Um, and the basically it's them against the hunters for capture the flag, and the hunters basically win. Bianca grabs the flag, I believe, and takes it back to base. And Thalia blames Percy for losing because he deviates from her plan, essentially. Typical Percy. I mean, and she calls him seaweed brain. Now, the reason why I didn't like this is because I don't hate Thalia as a character, but that's Annabeth saying like nobody calls him that. And it was like, it tugged at my heartstrings a little bit. I was like, please don't call him that. I was like, that's Annabeth's thing. And actually, Percy's written in the book that he doesn't like it either. And he calls her pine face. Which is actually a good one. Like if you think about it, like she was a tree. Like there's lots of tree puns and stuff in the book. And after they finish playing, the oracle comes out of the attic in the form of a green mist, and she goes straight up to Zoe and tells her the following prophecy. I've literally written it out, so I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for you guys. So she says, "Five shall go west to the goddess in chains. One shall be lost in a land without rain. The he- I can't even read my own writing. The haven of Olympus shows the trail. Campers and hunters combined will prevail. The Titan's curse one must withstand, and one shall perish by a parent's hand." So, in just this, you know that the hunters and cabin members are going to have to work together. That there's a monster that they're going to have to hunt down that is going to bring the downfall of Olympus. There's going to be at least one death of either a camper or a hunter. There's going to be one person that dies by the hand of their godly parent, and that there's going to be a rescue mission to save the goddess in chains, who is Artemis, essentially. And, the Titan's curse one must withstand, which is very important. So yeah, a lot, just those 5, 6 lines, like a lot is revealed about what's going to happen in the books. And it's sort of like one of those things where, sorry, I'll be back. Sorry about that, got interrupted. It was a bit of feedback. Anyway, let's go back. So yeah, chapter 6 is very important because there's a lot that's revealed. Like obviously there's a fun element to it, which is all the campers paying to capture the flag. But then the fact that the Oracle comes out of the attic, like she's never done that in all these years of campers going on quests, like she's never done that. So you just know that this is something that's really important. And I like how Rick has put it. I'm out of breath, bloody hell. Because I can't breathe from my nose, I find it really difficult to talk. It's such a big moment because it's like Rick has basically like made everybody quite scared by dragging the Oracle out of the attic. It's like, oh god, like something big's about to go down essentially, and I think that that's really interesting. So chapter 7 is Everyone Hates Me. So in this chapter, Grover and Percy are having to carry the Oracle back up to the attic, which is really funny. And I think Percy knocks her head or something, and she's like, oh, is she gonna feel that? Probably not. And then I can't remember who calls Percy, but somebody calls, I think it was Thalia. She calls him that they're gonna go downstairs and discuss the prophecy. So all the head counselors of each cabin, basically. And Zoe tells them that, oh, I'll take the hunters and we'll go and get Lady Artemis. And she doesn't want the help of the campers for some reason. She's got some sort of detest towards the campers. And she says that she's going to take Bianca and Phoebe, who is one of the other hunters, with her to go and get Artemis. And, Percy and Thalia, they offer to go on the quest. And so does Grover, but I think Grover's only going because he wants to impress them, essentially. And Chiron decides that Thalia and Grover will accompany the hunters because Percy says that she doesn't want a man anywhere near any of the hunters because obviously they're supposed to be maidens and stuff. But Percy says, you've already traveled with me before, but she goes, yeah, but that was like a situation that couldn't be avoided. Like, this is something like, I don't trust boys around my hunters, essentially. Not a very kind thing to say, but oh well. And Chiron tells Percy that Thalia and him are alike, which is funny because not only is Annabeth seeing it, but Chiron can see it as well, and I bet that's just pissing Percy off even more. Let's just put it like that. And, Chiron tells Percy that I think you should go home, like, here is very dangerous. Like, I think the best thing for you to do is to go home and get your mind off everything. So Percy decides that he's going to send his mum an Iris message. And when he Iris messages her, he sees her and she's talking to Paul Blowfist. Oh, do you know what? They are so cute. Like, as much as I ship, like, Poseidon and Sally, like, obviously Poseidon is a god and Sally is a mortal, like, it's never going to work. But when I see her with like Paul Blowfist and the journey that they're going to go on together, I think that's so beautiful. And he tells his mum about Annabeth, and he's like, I don't really know what to do. And Sally, in her sort of way, says like, oh, I think you should go. And he goes, why are you telling me to go? Because she's like, oh, I know you'll do what's best for Annabeth. And Percy's like, how do you know? And she says, because I know that she would do the same for you. Oh, it's so cute. I was like, oh, Sally is like me. She's such a shipper. I was like, yeah, she knows. Sally knows what's up. Like, I love that woman. She's so like unapologetically a shipper. Like, I love her for that. And then obviously after the Iris message is finished, Percy falls back asleep and he dreams about Annabeth again, and he sees Artemis trying to help Annabeth get this load that's basically crushing her to death off her, and he hears a man and Luke walking together. And the man tells Luke to kill Annabeth, and he says, no, 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 she might come in useful. So I think like Luke is also like there's glimpses of vulnerable Luke as well, where like even though he's given her this weight that's crushing her to death, there's still a good part of him. I think he's one of the best complicated characters that Rick has ever written. Like you don't know if he's fully negative because there are some positive streaks in his personality, and this is one of them. And he finds out that the man that's is there talking to Luke is looking for the monster to help them take down Olympus, essentially. And I believe, oh no, that's where the chapter ends. One more thing happens. Percy wakes up and he's left Annabeth's Yankees cap on his bedside table, and Blackjack appears at his cabin door and he says that, oh, there's an issue. Um, the hippocampi are calling you, essentially. So he leaves his cabin, he grabs her Yankees cap, and he says that he's not going to be back for a while. So you know that he's gonna make the decision to go and chase after Annabeth, even if it's the last thing that he does, and that's where the chapter ends. So chapter 8 is I Make a Dangerous Promise. So the chapter opens with Percy riding on Blackjack to the beach. He sees the hippocampi try to free a sea cow that's stuck. It's caught in a net or something, and that's why they were so distressed, and that's why they called Percy to help them. And he eventually helps free the sea cow. He spots Nico spying on the hunters because obviously he must be wondering about what's going to happen to his sister, and he hears them saying that Phoebe has actually been injured, like I don't know if she was stabbed or something. Like I can't remember the details of it. And Bianca tells Zoe that she should have told Thalia what actually happened in the rest of her dream. So you already know that the hunters are hiding something from the campers. They're keeping details to themselves because they don't want to. They don't want the campers to know anything, which is also very bad. It's not good at all. And it is revealed that Zoe knows who the general is and that she won't risk another hunter on the quest, and she doesn't want another camper, so that it's just the four of them that are going to complete the quest. So going against what the Oracle is saying, which is wrong as well, but we'll come back to that. And then Nico tells Percy to follow them invisibly, and he tells Percy to make him a promise that he will protect his sister. Now, that is a very risky promise because obviously Bianca is a hunter now, so it's not necessarily in Percy's power to protect her if she puts herself in danger. But Percy, being the fatally loyal person that he is, promises. And then, Percy says, well, what are you going to tell Chiron? Because I think he's going to notice that I'm missing. And Nico says, I'll cover for you, like it's okay. And then Blackjack he gets onto Blackjack and they're following this car that the rest of the Thalia, Grover, and the rest of the hunters have gone into to start the quest, essentially. And that's where the chapter comes to an end. So this is the second to last chapter that I'm going to be talking about. So this is the chapter 9, which is I learn how to grow zombies. You know what? These chapter titles get more and more impressive every single time. So the chapter opens with Percy riding on Blackjack, and they eventually catch up with the others. So they see the car that the others are traveling in. Before Percy can jump off this building, a vine grabs his ankle and pulls him and tightens around his whole body. And it is revealed that Dionysus is there, so he knows that Percy has broken the rules and gone after them. Percy tells him that, he has to be on this quest to save his friends. Again, that fatal flaw. I love that Rick is constantly reminding the audience of this because this is so important for the last two books, because Percy's somebody who would do his fatal flaw is personal loyalty. Like, he'll do anything to save a friend or somebody that he cares about. And Dionysus tells him about the story, why he hates heroes so much. And he tells him about Ariadne, who was his lover, who was in love with a hero, but he betrayed her. And obviously she fell in love with Dionysus and he made her immortal, and that she's waiting for him at Olympus. But the reason why he can't go to her is because he's being punished by Zeus, which I think is really funny. And he says that the reason why he tells Percy that the reason why he doesn't like heroes is because they are all the same, like they don't change. And you know he mentions something about Zoe, which is very important. But again, that's like the little seed that we watered up later on in the book, and eventually he lets Percy go. So Zoe is driving to Maryland, and Percy tells Blackjack to wait outside, basically. And then Percy scours the area looking for um the gang, obviously, because he can't see them anymore, and he overhears them talking while they're all arguing about where to go, basically. And eventually they decide to go to Washington DC, which was Grover's idea. And obviously Blackjack is having to take Percy everywhere. He must be exhausted. I mean, flying all night to catch up with them must have been crazy. And then they arrive outside the Washington Monument? Yeah, it's outside the Washington Monument, this bit. And Percy tells Blackjack to go back to camp and that he'll be okay without him. But just as he sees the gang, he also sees Dr. Thorne spying on them. So he follows them using Annabeth's invisibility cap to see where Dr. Thorne is going. But the rest of, so Thalia, Grover, and the other hunters, they go into the Smithsonian Museum, whereas Percy is following Dr. Thorne into wherever he's going, essentially. He sees Dr. Thorne go into the Museum of Natural History, and Percy sort of follows him around. Because he's invisible, I guess probably has no clue that he's following him. And then Percy sees the Scythian Drachnae. He sees Luke and the General, and Dr. Thorne tells them that Thalia, Grover, and the hunters have gone into the Smithsonian Museum. So basically, he's a spy for the General to take down the enemies, essentially. And then the General says that he's sent a playmate of his after them so that they cannot. So basically, they are distracted from coming after Luke, essentially, because Luke is the main central way that they are going to take over Olympus. But then that comes in book 4 and book 5, so a little bit later on. And the General reveals that he's actually the senior commander to Lord Kronos' army. So he's Atlas, basically, that's his name. And he tells them to isolate Thalia, and he mentions that Zoe Nightshade and him. So he basically says to separate Thalia, because obviously she'll be one of the most powerful demigods, because she's the child of the big three, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So yeah, he says isolate her and leave Zoe Nightshade to me, basically. And then the General sends Snake Ladies and Skeleton Army after the gang. And as Percy's hearing this, like, because he's so shocked, he falls down. And the General realizes that there's an intruder, and he says, lock all the doors. And Luke says, it's Percy Jackson, he's invisible. It's just so funny. ironic that Luke knows that it's Percy. I think that's hilarious. And then Percy manages to escape just before they slam the door shut, and he makes an absolute run for it. And that's where the chapter ends. So chapter 10, which is the last chapter I'll be talking about for this episode, is I break a few rocket ships. So Percy runs straight to the Smithsonian Museum to find everybody. And he tells them about Luke and the general and that they're here and they've sent somebody to come and attack them, essentially. Zoe and Thalia start arguing over why Percy is actually there because he's not really supposed to be on the quest, like he wasn't assigned to be on the quest. But Thalia says, like, since he's here, like, he might as well stay. And Zoe is completely adamant that she doesn't want him there. A Nemenian lion appears. Is it Nemean? Is it Nemenian? Nemean? I don't know how you pronounce it. Things in Greek really do confuse me sometimes because everybody pronounces it a different way, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, the lion appears and Thalia gets knocked down by the lion and it hits her in the head and she passes out. And Zoe sets up this way for Percy to kill the lion and he eventually does. And the lion sort of disintegrates, but it leaves its skin behind. And Zoe gives it to Percy. She's like, "You killed it, so it's technically your spoil of war." And he goes, "No, but you helped me set it up." And she goes, "No, no, no, it's yours. Keep it," basically. And just as they're having this amazing moment, men in camouflage start looking for them outside. And Zoe says to Percy, like, "You're the fifth member of our quest, so you know, you can help," basically. So she basically accepts him as being part of this quest, considering how adamant she was that she didn't want him on the quest. She's eventually caved. And that's where, you know, the chapter sort of ends, and that's where the first half of the book ends. So my final thoughts, because I've been talking for a wee long time, is that this book is definitely a lot darker than the first two books. The first two books are a lot about adventure and self-discovery and they're a lot more fun, whereas this book is very dark because it's talking I think it's like I said, like it's laying the foundation of what's going to happen in the last two books. The last two books are really dark. There's things happening that are awful 24/7, and I think this book is such a shift in tone from the rest of the books, which I really like I like that it's matured with the audience, like it's grown with the audience, like Rick is showing people that okay, these kids are for the first two books are just growing up and they're discovering who they are, and yes, they're going on this dangerous quest, but in fact everything is going to be okay. But in this book I think there's a lot more darkness and that it's a lot more realistic, I think, which I like. And I love that there's been an introduction of new characters. So I love that there's more of Thalia, obviously Zoe, Bianca, Nico. Like they're all people who are important throughout Rick's universe. So I like that they've all had a nice introduction in this book. I also love that it's set in the winter. Like it's the only book set in with Camp Half-Blood in the winter. So I think that aesthetically it would be so beautiful. I loved like imagining what it would look like when it was snowing. And I'm glad that Percy is a little bit more the moody teenager in this, you could say, because obviously he's lost Annabeth. And I think internally he blames himself for it, which obviously, and it didn't help that Thalia says that he was the reason why Annabeth disappeared. And I love that he's more pissed off and in a bad mood because he doesn't have Annabeth around anymore to help him. And I love that you see more of Luke because obviously Luke is really important. Like he's the main antagonist in the story. He has such an arc in these books, and I'm glad that we get to see more of him. And overall, like I just love that it's it's so much more adult, and I really appreciate that because obviously, like in the first two books, everything is very light. There are moments of darkness, but it's very, very light. Like there's been not really a big death or anything, but in this book, like things are about to change really fast, which I really like. I like that Rick has made it grow with the audience, like I said before. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening in. I really hope you enjoyed it. In the next episode, I will be talking about part two of Titan's Curse, big reveals, some deaths that could be potentially happening, which has already been revealed by the Oracle that something's going to go horribly wrong. And I can't wait to talk about what happens in Smithsonian Museum, well, the rest of what happens. If you haven't listened to my last four episodes, which the first two are part one and part two of the Lightning Book Thief review. So I gave you a summary of what happens in that book, and I talk about my thoughts and feelings, important scenes, that sort of thing. And then I did Sea of Monsters, so I talked about Siren Bay, Clarice, um, the Cyclops, that sort of thing. So yeah, If you haven't heard those episodes yet, I highly recommend you listening to those before continuing to listen to this. But like I said, thank you guys so much for listening in. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I sound awful. Hopefully in the next episode I've got a bit more of a voice and I'm not sniffling 24/7. But yeah, I will put these up together. I've decided to, even though I'm splitting this in part one and part two, I've decided that I'm going to upload them both together. So I will let you know on Instagram when it's live to listen to on Spotify and on my YouTube channel. And they're both at Aamsuntitledpodcast Podcast. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Aamsuntitledpodcast Podcast. DM me any questions, email me. That's at Aamsuntitledpodcast at gmail.com if you'd prefer that. I'll speak to you guys next week. The next episode will be part two of Titan's Curse, and then eventually I'm going to be moving on to the Battle of the Labyrinth, which I think I'm going to have to split into three parts. I'm not sure yet. I'll work that out, but I'll let you guys know in the next episode. Again, thank you so much for listening in. I'm sorry these episodes are so long. I really appreciate you guys listening in, and I will see you sometimes next week. Mwah! Bye.